Christina Tobin, and you're joining the Free and Equal Network today. We have John Dennis. He's run for Congress quite a few, one, two, three times out in California and San Francisco against this lady named Pelosi, who maybe won't be in office in the future if things go as planned here in the world. But John, welcome to our show today. Thank you so much for your time.
Oh, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Great. And I want our listeners just right to it, get to know about you. I see you as an individual. I've had lunch with you a couple of times. It's been awesome. There's this guy, Dr. Ron Paul. I know he endorsed your race back in the day. A lot of our supporters within Free and Equal have actually some, donated time towards you and your campaign efforts. And I kind of saw your race quite a bit, different from the rest. We recently interviewed actually Julie Fox out in Illinois for Comptroller as a libertarian. I see her similar individually with accountability. I'd love for the people to know who you are. What do you do for a living? Why you've run for Congress 3 times.
Well, I don't know. It's funny when you put it that way. I wonder why I did it myself. But no. I mean, I'm a businessman. I'm a husband, a father. Been mostly a businessman for my whole life, and I got excited about politics again in 2007 when I was actually in South Carolina, in Columbia, South Carolina, in my hotel room watching Ron Paul duke it out with Rudy Giuliani. And I'd supported Ron Paul. Actually, the only other political activity I had ever done outside of college was when I briefly worked on Ron Paul's presidential campaign in 1988 when I was living in Chicago. So when I saw Ron and Rudy, have their tete-a-tete, and Ron said, they don't attack us because we're rich and we're free. They attack us because we're over there. I said to myself in that hotel room, I've got to get involved in this, and that's how that whole little journey started. So I ended up working on Ron's campaign in a volunteer capacity in a number of states, and that got me into politics.
Wow, what did you do? Did you help with the ballot access side or just more outreach?
Mostly outreach. I mean, we started out, by doing some sort of local work with Republicans here, but then we kind of realized quickly, California is so late in the game in the primary season that all the action is in the early states. So I managed to, in 2007, I started a virtual call center with volunteers from around the country calling into Western Iowa where they needed some support in the Council Bluffs and north of that area. And then when the primary, the caucus happened in Iowa, I flew out there and actually participated in the caucus and spoke on behalf of Dr. Paul and won a bunch of votes. We won a bunch of votes that night in the caucus from. I think we won like 75% of the undecided votes that night in that caucus, and that was, I have to say, getting up there and speaking on his behalf, somebody I really believed in, the ideals that I believed in, was intoxicating. And then it just went from there. Where I did some work for him in the Nevada caucuses, in California, South Carolina, and so that's how that started.
The reason I asked that is because that's another reason that sets you apart from a lot of the candidates is that you're so engaged with your own campaign. It seems like you're involved on your social media. You respond to your own emails as much as you can to supporters and so on, and you're really aware of what's going on. It seems like a lot of campaigns that lose touch with being able to connect with people on social media. For me at Free and Equal Elections, I'm on our social media page every day because I listen to what the people say. They help guide me because I'm here to help create a voice for them. And you running for Congress, it seems like you're that type of person. And so, with you running 3 times now, it was in 2008, right? 10, 12, and 14. Is that correct? Right. So never, never, never give up. That Winston Churchill quote. I know I emailed it to you recently. What have been your results as you've relentlessly, really, John, continue tenacious to run over and over again? Can you tell us how what you've learned throughout the process for people out there that may be thinking about running for office for the first time? Tell them what you've learned and what you could teach them, as much in the next minute or two or so.
Yeah, sure. Well, regarding getting back in touch with people on social media and email, I have to say that was largely impossible in 2010 because this campaign had so much publicity and attention given to it that, in fact, more attention than any human being deserves in any one lifetime in like a 4 or 5 month period. But having said that, I'm trying to get back in touch with folks as quickly as I can and stay engaged in the campaign. It's the only way to do it. So I, run as a Republican. I've been a Republican for about 25 years, and the Republican Party, which used to actually control the local politics, has been drifting for the better part of 5 decades, to the point now where we might be 8% of the congressional district. So it's a huge help. I've got a little bit of name recognition, but the party running with the party certainly virtually guarantees me being in the top two. So in June, Pelosi got the most votes. I got the second most. But then it becomes, from that point forward, it becomes difficult because the brand is so damaged. When you get down to the point where you're 8% or less, people just are completely dismissive of you just because you're a Republican. And anybody who knows anything about my positions knows I'm not your typical Republican. I mean, I'm way more in the Ron Paul camp of the Republican Party than anybody might imagine. So that's discouraging and difficult. But having said that, we've had some successes. We've done better than registration in every election, and we're going to have our highest percentage of the vote, in 2014.
Congrats on there, John.
Thanks.
And the whole, you're not a typical Republican, I can vouch for that. You're not a typical Republican. I see you like an independent-minded Republican or individual or whatever it is. And to be frank, I feel that you have a bit of a left-right appeal, not like as in a label left, but just that on the bigger issues, we can agree that maybe we should not have NDAA, internet censorship, top two primary in California. I know you're a huge advocate against that. How do you feel that impacted the races recently in California? And also, if you could touch a little bit on voting methods as well, from top two to, we can go with top two first, and then I'll go into voting methods.
Top two, in extremely difficult races like this one, top two is okay, because then I only get to focus. Well, I get onto the November ballot, and then I only have to focus on one person. But of course, it's really, really, really tough to win. But I'll tell you something that's interesting about what's happened in the Republican Party is, I used to see the Republican Party as kind of like that. Well, they like to portray themselves as the big tent, and a lot of different voices. You have social conservatives, Tea Party types, libertarian types, moderates. And now what I see happening is you're getting this kind of the only candidates who seem viable are the kind of bland moderate candidates. And the party itself has kind of coalesced over a very narrow band of candidates that they're going to support. And it's become much more, it's much more of a duopoly than it ever was before because of top two. In the races where it really matters, if you're not a moderate, the party's going to attack you. They're going to spend money against you, and they're going to go. Even though in that district the right voice might be the conservative or the social conservative, or the libertarian. It's created an interesting dynamic, and I think a state that's going to end up. The state of California is going to end up getting mired in the awful direction in which it's been going for the last several decades.
Well, that does tie a bit into the recent Rasmussen reports, well, somewhat recent, earlier this year, that 52% of likely U.S. voters think it's fair to say that neither party in Congress is the party for the American people. So, that's 53%, and that's from this last April.
Right.
It might be a little higher. And, you go back into the Gallup poll here, record high, 42%. And again, this is earlier this year. Of Americans identified themselves as independent. So it really does seem like not just, I know you got the loyalty 25 years to Republicans and, Democrats. It seems like a lot of that support is dwindling down, and there's a huge support on the rise for independent or individual candidates, whatnot, in the future to run for office. So it's interesting that's kind of in sync. And top two, from what I've learned from Richard Winger of Ballot Access News, who will be moderating and also participating in our voting methods and election integrity panel in Colorado this Saturday. Pretty excited to fly out there tomorrow. But he's really going to address the topics of top two. And what I've learned, as kind of how you mentioned it, sterilizes political cleansing. Washington State's had it since 2008, 10. And, it sterilizes political cleansing. It's like Louisiana-style politics. You might as well call it Protect the Incumbents Act. So it ties in with the whole moderate D's and R's. The worst of the worst, pretty much, are the only ones that seem to get on the ballot in the primary, and they're up against each other in the general election. Of course, the media supports it because they're part of the problem, and of course, it increases negative campaigning. And so, I'm so happy the voters in Oregon voted no against Prop 90 top two there, like almost by like a 60, 70%, almost 70% margin. So people are waking up, and big money like Arnold and Bloomberg came out in the millions, 4, 5, 6 million, and trying to push top two through. But fortunately, they lost, and that was like the people coming together and spreading the truth,
Right.
like yourself. So, yeah.
Yeah, I just remember the Republican Party in the 90s that used to send out direct mail letters that attacked the jackbooted thugs who did X, Y, and Z, whatever they did, and that sort of, there's that sort of, frankly, anti-government voice, I think, is going to largely get left out, and it's an important voice to have, because I think, to sort of paraphrase Twain, said, be loyal to your nation always, and to your government when it deserves it. And conflating the two is a very dangerous act. And so the Republican Party had this kind of strong anti-government voice, or one that was actually would watch government like a hawk. And now that's kind of drifting away. And in this regard, I'm sorry to say, the Democrats have been largely useless. They don't have, there is no, watch the government like a hawk voice in the Democratic Party. And I think top two is just going to make that much worse.
Well, I definitely am with you on the Democratic party side, and I see, again, each Republican and Democrat as an individual. I've met some good Republicans that, for example, just were against top two, leader of the Republican parties. I mean, and Democratic as well came out against top two back in California in 2010. So they told me firsthand that what top two does is the people in power at the federal level, higher up, they would essentially take control over the Republican and Democratic parties at the state level. So that's pretty scary if they're even kind of getting troubled, worried, and coming out, uniting with libertarian leaders and Green Party leaders and so on. But as far as the two-party system, with all due respect, I love that Dr. Ron Paul endorsed your race, but that aside, I like you as an individual, whether Ron Paul was in the picture or not. But I do feel that, the party system, it just doesn't work. Somebody like Ron Paul, for example, they would rather kick him out, than let him take over, meaning they would rather crash the party than let somebody else like Dr. Ron Paul take over. And so they do work a bit hand in hand, maybe more so at the federal level, somewhat at the state, less at the local, it seems, and working together as a business. They need each other, the D's and R's. But moving forward, we know the problems, but the solutions to me right away, people like you running for office over and over and over again. And that is pretty awesome. What do you feel are some solutions out there that maybe on the voting method side and election integrity, whether it's instant runoff voting, proportional representation, gerrymandering, addressing the Electoral College? Do you think these are sort of issues that candidates that'll be running in the future should be educated about? And what are your thoughts on these sort of voting methods?
Yeah, this isn't an area where I've spent a lot of time studying. I mean, I do know that, speaking in terms of constitutional integrity, I'm not a big fan of the 17th Amendment. The government was structured, and the federal government was structured in a way so that the people were represented by the Congress, and then the states were represented by the senators. And to switch the Senate vote over to popular election, I think I'm not so sure I agree with that. I think it's led to sort of if you will, an over democratization for people. And so, in any event, I'd like to see that. We have instant runoff here in San Francisco. I know it creates a huge amount of confusion for people. But on the one hand, on the other hand, it ends everything the night of the election. So there are pros and cons to it. I mean, there's another whole voice within sort of the libertarian movement that says never vote. Don't go out, don't get involved in politics, stay away from it. You're lending your credibility by participating. And I have to say that there's been I hear where they're coming from. On the other hand, I notice that most of those people have benefited dramatically and significantly by Ron Paul's involvement in party politics and his voice on the national scene. So, so for me, it's been pretty clear. I mean, if I can be one of those voices that carries the torch, that does Isaiah's job for some period of time and passes it on to the next group by running in these elections and saying, hey, there's somebody else out here that thinks like you on these issues, then I'm happy to do that.
Wonderful. I think as far as instant runoff voting, for those who haven't been taught how to do it, it can be confusing, but I know the Grammys used it, and that seemed to go very successful. So it's just a matter of people becoming
Yeah,
comfortable and familiar
yeah,
with it, like using their cell phones. If you're maybe 40 or 50, 30s, it's a little more challenging than younger people and learning IRB, but proportional representation, I'm sensing seems to be a potential resolution. But like you, I'm still need to learn, and I'm with free and equal elections. So like the symposium this Saturday, we're going to be casting out ballots of different types of ballots, IRV, PR, approval voting, and so on, and really educating the crowd and the people on camera of how to use that. And these are the kind of tools we'll be sending to you and Julie Fox and candidates to learn at your own will. Regarding the never vote mentality, I have admitted quite a few times it was a big decision. I have probably not voted for quite some time. I don't even think since '08 probably or so. And it was a very, very challenging decision to make because on one end, I am a huge advocate. I mean, everybody that knows me for the whole getting people inspired to vote. But, two reasons. This current system is corrupt, it's flawed, and it's so hard for me and my conscience to be a part of something that I feel does not have utmost accountability. I don't want to play into that way of thinking, that brainwashing. But secondly, maybe there just haven't been, for me, the independent sort of candidates that I really are passionate about voting for that I feel I will be in the future. So that was a conscious choice. So my reason for bringing that up is for all those non-voters out there, I don't hold it against you for those who have not voted, but for in the future, we are all going to have to vote and get engaged, run for office, be involved in our political system. And so before I get to our final question, I wanted to just a couple, actually. I have probably three more questions. The debates. You're a huge advocate for opening the debates, and I know we work together, Free and Equal, and genuinely wanting to host a debate out there for you with Pelosi, and she declined. Can you give us a little bit of your feedback on that? That just the voters deserve to hear you and her debate. Have a
yeah.
conversation.
This is one of the congressional races that's, I think, almost a national race, and the interest. Certainly in 2010 and even 2012 and 14, I think there'd be significant interest. There would have been significant interest, and people would have watched that debate. I used to joke that it could have been a pay-per-view event. I mean, for somebody like me, coming from a base that's fairly small in the Republican Party in San Francisco, to get the opportunity to bring up issues of substance and to be seen in a different light, subverting the stereotype of what people have as a typical Republican, would have been obviously enormously useful. But also in terms of civic engagement, I mean, look, Nancy Pelosi has done things that folks on the left aren't particularly happy with. I mean, my main issues in this race were, why did she vote after the Snowden revelations to continue to fund the NSA when they had an opportunity? That vote, the Conyers Amash, only lost by 7 votes. And presumably she lobbied behind the scenes to make sure that Conyers Amash didn't squash the NSA's funding. She voted for the NDAA. And she's been fairly, she certainly hasn't done anything to stop foreign wars. And there's all sorts of things that we could have talked about that would have been interesting for people in San Francisco. But she it's a voluntary thing. I can't compel her to participate. And I think that for libertarians, and I remember how well what's her name, the woman down in Texas who was running for the state senate, Deborah Medina, how well she did in those debates. I think solid libertarian debaters can do exceptionally well in debates, and I really relish that opportunity, as I think a lot of others would as well.
Well, I commend back the last election, Ron Paul putting together that press conference out in D.C. I know Ralph Nader was there, and others combining across the political spectrum. And that was pretty awesome. And that was an inspiration, in '08 when I was working nationally as a ballot access coordinator for Ralph Nader. I would have done it for Ron Paul, too, simultaneously. But after completing that job, that was, as you know, the creation of free and equal elections. We hosted our first debate because Ralph just told me the importance of opening the debates. And that being said, how do we open the debates? It's definitely been a lot of strategy with what we've done with the Larry King debate, the recent one in Colorado. There's always a plan that I have in my head of foresight. That's a huge strength of having so much foresight. So Governor Gary Johnson recently sued the Commission on Presidential Debates, which, might I add, the League of Women Voters has specifically stated that it has perpetuated a fraud on the American voters when they removed themselves from the Commission on Presidential Debates back in the late 80s, 88, I believe. And so it looks like he's actually going to be bringing Dr. Jill Stein on, the Green Party, as well, presidential candidate as a plaintiff, and the Green Party national as well. I've been working very hard behind the scenes to help in every way I can to make that happen, and it looks like it is happening with an amazing legal counsel who actually participated in our 2008 debate. Can't say his name, but that's almost giving his name out. And so I'm really excited about that. And so after our symposium, voting methods symposium this Saturday, we hope to plan on holding a press conference in Colorado, uniting these leaders of Gary Johnson, Jill Stein, hopefully working with Our American Initiative, awesome group with Gary Johnson so far, and working with them. And maybe other leaders like the Jesse Venturas and the Dennis Kucinich. He's a huge supporter of ours. As you may recall, he submitted a video in support of our debate this last October. Very sweet of him. Of course, to Dr. Jill Stein, to Ralph Nader, to all these amazing leaders that have come together in opening the debate. So that gets to the end of the interview. The United We Stand Fest next September, tentatively, very likely to take place September 12th and 13th in Colorado. And we have a venue that's very interested, pending. We're working out the details there. Would love to have you come out there and speak, John. Is that something that you could do? And maybe if Dr. Paul or someone's there, I can't think of a better person to introduce him on the stage, independently of speaking yourself, because you guys have ran for office. So you, Paul, I see you all the same. You love the people, you love the world, you want to bring about peace, but you need a platform to be heard on. And that's where free and equal is. So you don't think, okay, after 3 times, I can't do this anymore. You think, now I have this platform of free and equal elections bringing me to all these other people who can help support my race. I'm going to keep going. And that's, my role in helping to build others. So I would like to humbly invite you to be a part of our United We Stand Fest next September.
Oh, yeah, I'd be honored. I mean, if the dates work, I'd be happy to be there. And any opportunity I get to introduce Dr. Paul would be my honor. I think I've done it 2 or 3 times now, and it's always been a huge thrill to do. And I have to tell you, I really commend you guys. You guys have really played a special role now in American politics. And anybody who's listening to this ought to really, get on your website and donate, write checks, send money to Free and Equal, because imagine how the dynamic of the American presidential politics would change if they allowed some of these, some of the reasonable third-party candidates to get in the debates. The issues that would come up. Tom Woods talks about how there's only this very narrow acceptable band of political thought and ideas in the United States, and that's where you guys step in and really try and expand that, so we have a sort of a fuller representation of what people really actually think and believe. So I can't ask people enough to support Free and Equal. You guys do great work. You were incredibly supportive in trying to get Pelosi to debate me, which would have made my dreams come true. But people should step up and help Free and Equal. You guys are great.
Thank you. We can still make those dreams come true for sure. And regarding the debates, of course, the United We Stand Fest next September 12th through 13th, tentatively slated, is the kickoff for a 2016 presidential debate tour, which will be ending that tour in Colorado, likely at the same venue where we're holding the United We Stand Festival next year. So on that note, with the record high independence, like I said, I'm all about more choices, having more representation for third parties and all. But I have seen as parties become larger, whether they're the main parties, third parties, they inevitably become infiltrated at the national level, which is why I go back to this little book. I wish it's over there. Can't grab it, called The Constitution, which has no mention of parties whatsoever. And I feel that parties and money in politics will fade away. The people want that. And so, on that note,
I just want to tell you one thing real quick,
Mhm.
You know, last year we had friends in from overseas, and we were down at staying at the Roosevelt Hotel in LA around New Year's, and my family and our friends ran into Larry King, and I really, really regretted not being there at that moment, because the first thing I would have said to him was, I want to congratulate you for being the host of the Free and Equal third-party debates in 2012. That was an enormous contribution to political life in the U.S. And that's of all the things you could probably talk to Larry King about. That's the only thing, and I would have mentioned your name to him as well. But yeah, I mean, anything that anybody can do to help Free and Equal, I'd recommend they do.
Well, thank you so much, and I definitely am so grateful Larry did that and Aura TV. And finally, I have to ask it, John. I know you may not be able to answer it today, and maybe you can think about it. But planting the seed, would you ever run as an independent in the future? And do you think that would allow the voters to judge you as an individual without a label?
Yeah, I don't see me running as an independent. And at the moment, actually, I don't really even see me running again. I think there are other things I could do Isaiah's job. I can do it in different ways, but in any event, you never know. I mean, you never say never in politics, because that can always lead to trouble.
Well, a race like yours, if there were to win against Pelosi as an independent in the next election cycle, I think would inspire many people to run for Congress even more in 2020. Because here's your just everyday, awesome, laid back, authentic guy that wants to make a positive difference in the world, who hasn't given up consistently. And I think that will plant a very positive seed towards many others. So on that note, if you ever need ballot access, I might have a few connections for that. Well, maybe quite a few. And helping coordinate over 1 million signatures to get candidates on the ballot. So I know that's probably the biggest uphill battle when it comes to making a decision to run as an independent for most offices. So, John, thank you so much for being on the show today. And did you have any other final thoughts before we wrap up?
No, you never know what happens. There's some nonpartisan races, but anyway, we'll see. I just hope that you guys continue to flourish.
Wonderful, and I support whatever it is your heart tells you to do always. And thank you so much for joining us today. And everybody, you have John Dennis here on the Free and Equal Network. Check him out online. John, what was your website for your campaign? Oh,
John Dennis for Congress, and then you can find me on Facebook, John Dennis for Congress, or just John Dennis on Facebook.
You might actually be able to reach him too, because he's kind of that kind of guy. So, all right. Well, thank you so much. You guys have been joining the Free and Equal Network today. I really actually enjoyed this interview quite a bit. And thank you again, John, so much for your time. And I'll be seeing you, I'm sure, in San Francisco sooner or later.
Okay, my pleasure. See you soon.
Okay, take care.
Bye now.